It's not every day that you come across a series of retro video games that were all connected, right under your nose, and you didn't even know it. Take Flying Warriors, for example. Seeing this game in the video game store with its muscle-bound, spandex-clad superheroes standing proudly up on the cover made me feel like the developers were trying too hard to appeal to North American audiences, and I'd like to imagine that I'm not the only one who felt this way. But digging beyond the cheesy cover art, we're left with a game struggling with not only an identity crisis, but also a cultural one. Flying Warriors' original name in Japan? Well, that's a bit of a doozy. The game is a combination of two titles in the Hiryo no Ken series, created by Culture Brain. This series started in arcades with a title called Shanghai Kid, and later moved on to the NES in North America with Flying Dragon: The Secret Scroll in 1988. Flying Warriors combined the sequels, Hiryo no Ken 2 and Hiryo no Ken 3, taking bits and pieces from both and slapping a generic superhero visual style onto it at a later portion of the game. Your main playable character is Rick Stalker, a martial arts master who is being mentored by Gen Lao Su. During a quest to find a woman's missing robe, you end up finding a magic orb called the Orb of Courage, which kickstarts Rick's journey across the world to not only fight in tournaments, but to take on a being by the name of Demonix. Years ago, Demonix tried to leave the Dark Dimension, but was foiled by the Light Dimension's hero, Dragonlord. Demonix was sealed into the Dark Dimension, only to leave a warning that they would return when the Red Star fell, and of course, the Red Star has fallen several years later. The story here is pretty convoluted, and Rick ends up becoming a superpowered warrior guy thanks to a magic sword. Okay, so He-Man much? But super generic. Alright, got it. He also transforms a few characters that he meets along the way, converting Mary, Hayato, Greg, and Jimmy into these flying warriors. Despite this, Rick is the main hero of this story, and you play as him for almost all of the game. Regarding the gameplay, this title takes a bit of inspiration from other games, like Adventures of Bayou Billy or Vice Project Doom, by introducing multiple playstyles. In Journey mode, stages are side-scrolling and involve Rick finding various magical items by defeating enemies in battle. He can farm coins to purchase different power-ups, such as the Charm, which gets rid of almost all enemies for a short period of time. There's also the Bait, which I've yet to figure out, and the Windy Shoes, which can take you back to a different part of the level. Mystic Potions are also available that you can use to refill your life with the Select button. Your health is showcased at the bottom left-hand side of the screen, along with the bosses that you fight, when applicable. Everything is number-based, and Rick can level up thanks to experience points acquired when defeating enemies. A is jump, B is kick, and he can do an aerial punch if he presses A in mid-air. Honestly, the journey portion of the game is my favorite. Finding hidden rooms and items scattered throughout the game is made easier thanks to helpful tips from NPCs that you'll encounter. Fighting enemies successfully without getting hit often will boost your KO meter, which will give Rick a fireball attack when the meter hits 100. The meter never falls below 40 for the record. Oh, and there's only one instance of this, but you'll encounter a single invulnerability item that I couldn't seem to find anywhere else but in Stage 2. Weird. We begin to see the problems pop up once we reach the Tusk Soldiers. When they are defeated, you enter the Dark Dimension, changing the playstyle and challenging them once more. There's some training for this with your master prior to facing the Tusk Soldiers, but the gameplay here completely butchers the game for me personally. In this combat mode, which the game gives you the option between a standard and master mode at the beginning, you'll shift into a 1 versus 1 fighting style, similar to Karate Kid on the NES. This is also a separate tournament mode, accessible at the beginning of the game in the options. In standard mode, you press left or right to block or dodge attacks, B to either kick or punch, along with several other move options that are available. As you finish a journey mode level, you're then whisked away to fight against enemies in a tournament, some of which will end up leading you to a separate fight in the Dark Dimension. These 1 versus 1 matches are extremely tough to control, as left and right are not only block options, but movement options as well, so you'll spend your time either dancing around the screen with an enemy, or blocking when you don't mean to. And the window for attacking becomes so small in later stages that there becomes a heavier focus on pattern adjustment. Learning the enemy's attacks requires Rick to be defeated over and over again until you figure out how to defeat them. The controls here are so broken that you'll become enraged playing this one. Do you want the floating health potion? Nah, you'll never get to it in time because you're frozen in place and can't jump. You can get out of a hold by alternating with left and right, but sometimes I won't even be restrained by an enemy and I still can't attack them. I'm mashing the buttons to attack when my opening comes and nothing happens. I try a different controller, same thing. This game doesn't do what I'm telling it to, and it's completely frustrating. And yet, somehow I'm able to struggle through enemy after enemy. When entering into the Dark Dimension, Rick and his newly acquired fellow flying warriors can transform into these superheroes, enabling them to use powers to defeat their enemies. Or maybe not. I believe your KO meter has to be 100 in order for you to use spells, but getting your KO meter up in this mode is so difficult, it's just easier to struggle with occasionally getting lucky with random attacks. There's also jump kick attacks, leg sweeps, and roundhouse kicks, but I can hardly ever get these to connect. Same thing with the throw option. Moving on, after a few levels, a new RPG-style battle mode is introduced. This is a roll of the dice where your characters can be switched between each other. However, they all share the same health points, which is pretty frustrating since you're switching between characters. In this RPG mode, you can block attacks, or at least attempt to. Enemies can block yours as well during these battles. Your main attack method is spells, which are all different depending on your chosen hero or heroine. Despite the flaws with this mode, I actually enjoyed the sort of rocks, paper, scissors mentality that it kind of had. There's a password option, but keep in mind it will start you at the beginning of whatever level you're at, though it will save your progress as far as items or level achievements. There's also a way to advance further in the game if you wanted to use passcodes by first putting in an 8, then the level and subsection of the level, but it's a bit confusing as the level numbers never line up properly, so you'll end up overshooting your level skip. I will say that the graphics and sound in this game are really solid. Cutscenes have a great art style to them, despite the strange storyline, and the in-game graphics, particularly during the journey mode, are full of big sprites, engaging enemies, and levels which are full of variety, as Rick and the gang travel all over the world. The sound driver sounds just like something out of Prisoner of War on the NES, which leads me to believe perhaps they borrowed it from SNK? Music is triumphant when Rick has completed his journey and is headed to the end of each level, which is a smart way to show the player through sound that their job is done. Genres range from hard rock of the level 1 main theme to the more traditionally Eastern-style Japanese instrumentation. While I feel like the graphics could have been a little better during the one-on-one scenes, since it tends to shrink the sprites a bit, it's still a good-looking game. I realized something while playing Flying Warriors. I was enjoying myself in the journey and RPG battles, but the one-on-one fighting was so busted, it crippled the entire experience for me. When you're wrestling with non-responsive controls instead of just having a good time, what's the point of pushing to the end? Sadly, after several levels, I hit a brick wall, being unable and unwilling to push past one of the main bad guys, Dargan, in hand-to-hand combat. For the first time in nearly 7 years of reviewing games, I just couldn't push myself through this game. Plagued by marred controls and an awkward gameplay mechanic pretty much sealed the deal for me here, which is a shame because I really enjoyed the journey and RPG elements. Not every game is successful at being a hybrid. Flying Warriors may have gotten the best of me, but I'm curious about what your opinion on it was. Leave a comment below. A huge thank you to Trevin Adams for providing me a copy of the game and making the review possible via the Patreon mini review tier. Thanks to all my other patrons of the channel as well. If you're interested in joining my Patreon, follow the link down below, and be sure to check out these other reviews. As always, thanks for watching.